that everyone will have probably lots of questions. As I say, we'll try and keep the event flowing quickly. So without much further ado, we will get going. So the Northwoods Innovation Programme, for those of you that don't know, is a platform that is supporting and developing innovative approaches to woodland management, with the primary aim of trying to support woodland owners and managers bring more woods into management. We're doing this through kind of three different channels, one of which is demonstrating and sharing innovative tools, and that's where this evening comes in. We're running demonstration events, networking events, webinars, seminars, and releasing a range of case studies to support and share different ways of managing trees and woodlands. We're also running kind of a support program for those that have ideas and tools that they want to develop. So we have a range of different experts working on the project, and they can support you with the development of an innovative idea or tool. And as part of that, we're kind of supporting the Silver Foundation and their online platform, My Forest, and improving the functionality there, adding additional capabilities to that mapping platform already. For those of you that use My Forest, hopefully you'll have seen in the spring that they've recently launched the geospatial maps, which means you can now download the maps on your phone and take them into the woods with you and plot features slightly more accurately. We're working through an improved inventory capability currently to help you undertake your woodland inventories, and next year they'll be developing a timber auction module which will support woodland owners and managers to move woodlands through to point of sale. So ultimately, we are trying to re-establish a woodland initiative and a forestry sector support programme in the North East and Yorkshire. The great thing about webinars is that we can transcend those boundaries, and I know there's a few of you here tonight that aren't based up in the North East or the Yorkshire. We're delighted to have you with us and to kind of that this is of relevance to you and of interest to you. But do forgive us if we do touch a little bit on the North East and Yorkshire, as that's primarily where we are based. As I mentioned, there are a number of different partners working to this project. It is funded by the Forestry Commission. It's hosted by Reheats, who are a biomass engineering and forestry consultancy business based here in Northumberland. We've also got support from RDI Associates, Martin Glynn, I've already mentioned the Silver Foundation, and also Timber Auctions as well. So without further ado, I will introduce our first speaker, Nigel. I just mentioned quickly before Nigel starts to speak, we ran an event back in September looking at identifying, assessing and managing risk of Ash Dieback in woodlands up here in Northumberland, where Nigel kindly took us through a site walk and looked at identification, assessing and risk management on site. And this event's really kind of spun out of that. And we've added a few more speakers as well to address some other aspects. So Nigel kind of briefly cover his event that I think we spoke for about an hour and a half last time. So we're going to try and cover it in 15 minutes. It will be brief, and we'll probably send out some supporting information afterwards. But Nigel, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rosanna. Evening, everybody. Lovely to see everybody, and thanks for inviting me along. So my name's Nigel Chopping. I am arboricultural consultant. I'm based in Northumberland, and I work throughout the north of England, really, which I class anywhere from Sheffield up to Land's End. So that includes Scotland as well. So my background is arboricultural consultancy. I've been in the industry since the late 90s, and I can't believe it's been that long, but the time just slips by somehow. Anyway, so I'm just going to talk to you a little bit today about sort of my perspectives about Ash Dieback, a bit of background to it, and hopefully there'll be some questions at the end. Just in terms of what we're going to look at in the next few minutes, really, is I'm I'm just going to talk about a bit about the history of it, its spread, give a bit of background, and what is it, what are the practical implications for it, for the trees and owners, and then start to look at a little bit about the management options, which hopefully will sort of segue nicely into what Eleanor, Mark, and Robert possibly can talk about as well. So, Ash Dieback generally, it's from Eastern Asian origin, and it's been there for a long time. It's developed along with a number of other issues, but due to that sort of co-evolution in its sort of natural habitat, if you like, it's not really caused any issues. However, it's progressed as it's sort of gone along, and it was initially sort of known in Europe in the mid 1800s in its asexual stage, and it was regarded generally as being non-pathogenic and didn't really cause too much of a problem. It sort of started appearing on the radar, if you like, in the early 90s in Poland, where it was recorded, and there it was known as Kalara fraxinea, Kalara Ash Dieback, that sort of thing, and those are terms that you might have heard of yourselves. And it's often referred to still in some texts in that respect. Around 2010, it was recognised in its sexual stages as a different species, and then it sort of became recognised internationally in 2014 as Hymenocipus fraxinea. We first sort of noted it in the UK in February 2012, and it was spotted on some infected plant material that was brought into the country from the Netherlands, and then subsequent to that, it started turning up on sort of natural sites and so on, and so ever since then, since we started looking into it a lot more, they can actually find evidence of it being present in the UK since about 2006. So yeah, it could well have been brought in on infected material. It could well have come through sort of airborne distribution as well. What we know really is that it basically infects the trees by airborne spores in the summer, and those spores are derived from fruiting bodies that are on leaf litter, leaf stalks that are on the ground over the winter. It's a fungus that favours sort of quite moist conditions, really, and we've identified it in the UK. What I've popped up on the screen there just gives a quick sort of impression, really, but that's from Forest Research 2022. It illustrates quite quickly, really, the distribution of the disease, really, and it's prolific. It's pretty much everywhere. It leads to decline in the canopy, and not all ash trees will die as a result of it. Some have got some resistance, but it just generally causes problems. We think probably about 5% of the population is going to have some degree of genetic tolerance to it. It's sort of found that climate, site conditions, and the extent of tree cover locally has a big sort of influence on the spread of it, and whether it's going to affect trees, stands of trees, and so on. I think generally speaking, we're finding that solitary trees are more resistant, and this could be due to sort of the higher canopy temperatures that they experience compared to those in a closed canopy environment, and also that they're probably a bit more distal to larger populations of ash trees and so on. But it's spread, really. I mean, mortality rates, it's been cited as, in a woodland setting, 100% within 30 years, but it's probably more likely we're going to be about 50 to 75%. The highest rates in Europe have been recorded as 85% in a woodland setting. So, pretty devastating, really. The rates are less certain for your individual trees, and field boundary trees and urban trees and that sort of. So in terms of what it is, well, we know it's a fungus, we know it's a pathogen. It affects ash, it affects Fraxinus, and there's all manner of species that it could affect in that genus. So particularly our common ash, and particularly I've seen weeping ash generally holds a low level of resistance. But generally we're concerned with common ash, which accounts for about 12% of our woodland population in the UK. So the concern is that, you know, the ash is a very important tree species in the UK. There's about 955 species associated with ash trees, and 45 of those are only really found on ash themselves. So it's going to have quite an impact. And much like other diseases that we're seeing, or we've seen, Dutch elm disease, most obvious, it's probably going to persist in the environment. So the fungus gets onto the trees, into leaf scars, nodes, any damages and that sort of thing, and it affects the water transport system. And here's some photos. These ones are courtesy of the Forest Research because they're pretty good, really. But it affects the leaves. You can see there the top photo. You know, we've got a healthy leaf versus an infected leaf. I'm sure many of you have seen those, unfortunately. The lesions, bottom left photo, is quite common, and you can see them on the bottom right as well. And that just illustrates the disruption to the water transport system. Contributes to, you know, reduced vigor in the whole tree, and results in dieback. We've got to be cautious, really. I mean, once it starts infecting the trees and starts debilitating them, it reduces the growth processes. It reduces the normal sort of resistance functions within the trees and so on. And so trees can become susceptible to secondary pathogens. And that's one I found last week, and with armillaria on ash, quite a significant infection there. We've got to be careful, though, not to confuse the symptoms of ash dieback with other maybe root diseases, stem disease that give rise to dieback as well. So the implications are we've got a progressive disease, really, and there's a few photos that I've picked up around the place that are just popping up, really. And what we see is that it slowly progresses through, causing dieback. As the disease progresses, reinfects every year, etc., the dieback increases. And so relatively healthy tree in the first picture there. You could suggest there might be some sort of early stage 1 in there, but then you can see it's progressing further. And that tree that we're looking at in that picture, that year's growth has died out probably 2 years, maybe even, and it's progressing even further, and so on, until you get to a point where you get complete mortality. So there's some pictures. The general effect that we're seeing of it is it can affect stability, particularly with smaller diameter trees, where it affects them more readily. And generally causes dieback, embrittlement of the wood, and so on. You can get large diameter deadwood, and eventually sort of gives rise to collapse. Important thing really is that, you know, these trees have got to be managed, haven't they? But not all trees will die. Not all will require removal. Even in their latter stages, they're still a valuable habitat. So we've got to bear that in mind. What we're finding, really, obviously, you know, as you're no doubt aware, under various pieces of legislation, Occupiers Liability Act, Health Safety at Work Act, etc., you know, tree branches falling, etc., where they cause damage or an injury, you know, liability can arise. And the important thing is ash dieback is foreseeable. It's a foreseeable risk. So, you know, we've got to manage it. So any action that we take in respect of it has got to really be site specific, look at what the trees are, where they are, and what the target potential is. So, and also they've got to be timely as well. Really, the sort of the biodiversity element around the trees is a definite strong consideration, but public safety has to sort of remain as the paramount thing, really. So but as owners, there's got to be careful and appropriate action taken. So I think an approach that I've advocated and used myself is risk mapping and zoning, and looking at on a site-specific basis. I think generally speaking, I mean, what have popped up there is very crude, but those are sites where roadside trees have been zoned. So you can see the red ones are your higher risk areas. So generally the risk related to trees increases quite a lot where speed increases as well. So anything near a road is a sort of like a zone 1 risk. And then around footpaths, it becomes a zone 2. Trees in remote areas with no public access, I would leave them alone. So, and there's various guidance that will support that approach. So the key thing is, once you've identified those zones that we've found, is and no doubt Eleanor will touch on this as well, is look at the trees and allocate their health class and grade the level of sort of deterioration in them. Generally, stage 1 and 2 is a monitoring, maybe take some action. Stage 3 and stage 4, where we're seeing the decline get beyond 50% of the canopy area, we're going to be taking action and that sort of thing. Any inspection in that respect should be looked at late on in the growing season, when the disease has become sort of more advanced and so on, and you can see its symptoms quite clearly. So, got to bear in mind, this is a statement from Forestry Industry Safety Accord. Affected trees are uniquely dangerous, uniquely unpredictable due to the embrittlement, and obviously can cause issues when it comes to felling and managing that. So early sort of intervention could be good from that perspective as well. If we're taking trees down, obviously there's other considerations. Statutory protection. A tree that may get ash dieback is not a material consideration if it's subject to a TPO or something like that. There has to actually be something going on before we can take action with those. However, that doesn't preclude you from sort of good woodland management practices and part of an overall scheme and so on. Trees the horizons can be moved, and that's the timber and the branches and so on. That's fine. There are restrictions based upon the moving of new planting stock, ash stock, and so on. Grant aid may well be available to help with that as well. So that was quite a whistle-stop tour. I hope that was okay for you. I've produced, and this was circulated before, a briefing note which has a bit more detail in it, which, by all means, I think you're going to circulate that around, Rosanna, maybe. But that will be available, and that will put a bit more information into it. So hopefully that's a good sort of quick background into the situation. Okay.
Thanks, Nigel. That's really helpful. And hopefully, what you've introduced there, the ash dieback, how it's arrived in the UK, and then what we're starting to look for as woodland owners, managers, and tree guardians as well, depending on who's on the call. Also moving on to Eleanor now, and other support in terms of guides available to landowners. I'll let Eleanor introduce herself and also the guide that they've produced.
Great. Thank you. Let me just share my screen for everybody. Great, thank you so much for having me on. My name is Eleanor Marks. I'm a technical officer at LEAF, Linking Environment and Charity. Linking Environment and Farming. We are a sustainable farming charity, working predominantly for the last 30 years in delivering
Eleanor, one moment, you've just muted, hang on.
is that
Yes, that's better. There we go. Oh, you've gone mute again.
it's not me, I promise.
There we go. Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, great.
Sorry about
Okay,
that.
no problem. That's okay. Let me I'll just good. So yes, I'm here to talk about the Farmer's Guide to Ash Dieback. This is a project that was produced in collaboration with Forest Research and the University of Exeter and Ferro Science. And as I sort of started rather badly there, I'm from Leaf Linking Environment and Farming, which is a charity which for the past 30 years has been delivering and promoting climate positive, resilient and exemplar sustainable farming at an increasingly global scale. We explore new ways to deliver productivity and prosperity amongst farmers in ways that also enriches the environment and engages young people and society in farming. And this is through our integrated farm management projects, as well as our Leaf Mark certification scheme and education work as well. And we've got a brilliant network of demonstration farmers and innovation centres across the UK. So the Knowledge to Action project is what really started the work towards this Farmer's Guide to Ash Dieback. And it's essentially a story that can be divided into this time frame, into each into this sort of seasonal time frame. Starting off in 2021, the Knowledge to Action project led by Forest Research came to Leaf to help them discuss and figure out why there's this gap in farmer knowledge about tree health, and to also help find out what actions were needed to improve this knowledge and action gap in the farming community. So Leaf was approached for not only our farming perspective, but also to access our network of farmers as well. So we started off really by talking to them. We hosted interviews and workshops to identify these knowledge gaps. And it was at these workshops and events that we identified that a hook in the conversation around tree health was going to be something that farmers could identify and recognise, and that were an issue that was already in the landscape, and that was ash dieback. And the conversations went on, and we figured that farmers really needed a resource on this particular health issue, tree health issue, that was tailored to them and their perspective. So the creation of the Ash Dieback Guide was what started. So spring 22, we started to draft the structure of the guide and develop its content alongside experts, as well as lots of workshops and meetings with farmers, just to make sure we were tackling those key questions that they had. In summer 22, we continued with workshops and content checking. We had one-on-one editorial meetings with advisors, as well as policymakers or people within DEFRA, to make sure we were aligning across all of those industries. And then in autumn, thankfully, just before the leaves dropped, we filmed some case study videos to be integrated into the guide as well, which was good fun. And then spring this year, we had a range of launch events to release the videos and the guides. We had some webinars with the University of Exeter and Forest Research. And since the launch, we've been speaking at things like the Agroforestry Show about the guide and work that it's led on to. So yeah, it's been quite a roller coaster, and has definitely opened up the world of forestry to Leaf's perspective and Leaf's work, which has been fantastic. So this is the product. A Farmer's Guide to Ash Dieback, 6 simple steps to identifying, assessing and managing ash dieback. And it's essentially a collection of 3 main key areas. So policy recommendations, technical tree health science and advice, and the farming perspective. The overarching aim really was to promote a proactive and proportionate approach to ash dieback. And by proactive, we mean being aware and prepared to take action on trees across their farm. And by proportionate, we mean managing trees in a way that's proportionate to the level of risk they present. It was a job where we had to make sure we avoided scaremongering the guide users into a mass felling frenzy and show that in many cases, as Nigel touched upon, ash can be left standing where it is safe to do so, and it can still benefit nature when left in place. So yeah, there are a range of things to consider, but what really helped was just the level of engagement we had with forestry and farming organisations in the forms of meetings and workshops, as well as getting some people on site in front of camera as well for our videos. And while this is a LEAF branded document, we believe that it is everybody else's as well, thanks to all of their input. However, with all of this technical information, it did come with some challenges, and we realised as LEAF and from our perspective, our position, we had a really important job of farmerising this very technical arboricultural information that we had in front of us. So just an example in terms of development, what we were going through. Here's a decision tree that we were drafting with Forest Research about legal permissions. As you can see, it is quite a lot to try and figure out. We're trying to make sure we touched every base, and we'll make sure we hadn't missed anything. But essentially, we boiled it down to some key aspects that we knew farmers were had to be concerned of. So the first being permissions around what the habitat the tree provides, so and the wildlife that might be protected, permissions around the tree itself, and permissions around the area that the tree or trees are found in. So yeah, that was how we were farmerising things and making sure that we were hitting priority topics that we knew farmers were most concerned about. So just the general structure, we've split the guide into 2 phases. We've got a total of 6 steps and wanted to initiate a clear flow that addresses real questions from farmers. So the first phase is on responding to ash dieback, with step 1, how to identify it and assess the level of risk that particular tree is posing on farm. Actions to take to, well, step 2, actions to take to protect yourself and others. So looking at health and safety procedures, things like insurance and understanding just the level of risk that those unpredictable trees pose. Step 3 is about preparing to act, so ensuring all the permissions and paperwork is in place. We've provided within the guide lots of links to where support can be found in terms of on-site support. And step 4 is about taking action, and first action being, do you need to take any action at all? Can you leave it? And then from there, the different options that might be suitable for that particular case. The second phase, recovering from ash dieback, we realised was really important to highlight that this is an opportunity to show farmers how they can protect existing treescapes on their farm. So biosecurity measures for future problems, but also the importance of keeping trees where possible, if they are diseased or not. And then step 6, we highlight where you can go to restore trees on the farm following some felling, whether to do with ash dieback or other things, and the long-term benefits and gains of having trees on farm. So in terms of what's within the guide, our main features are things like illustrations to show the health class system. So yeah, as Nigel touched upon, the 1 to 4 identification, which also brings in mentioning of secondary infections as something that people should perhaps consider in terms of risk. Sort of high to medium and low risk areas, what they might look like. In the guide, we've got lots of examples. We address real questions that farmers came to us with and have answered them as clearly as we can, bullet points and statements, as well as links leading on to further support. And then also at the end, for people who perhaps find a slightly more granular information or something for them to work through, easier to work with, we've got an action checklist for each scenario that people might come across. Here's the little collection of our videos, which is integrated within the guide. They all lead on to each other. And yeah, this was just fantastic, getting farmers and advisors on site together in front of the camera. Yeah, got some brilliant examples of farmers who've simply been able to identify tree health issue and from the tractor cab while doing another job, while doing a crop walk, and has been in a position where they can approach their woodland manager and communicate with them about it and take that proactive approach. So yeah, these videos are really successful and well received, and it was yeah great to work with everybody that we had on board. So essentially, sort of a final general point that's come out of this project is that tree health is definitely is a farming concern, but it's almost equally so that tree health on farm is a forestry concern as well. It's a collaboration between these industries and the communications and the perspectives that need to be shared. And here at Leaf, we're a believer that the fact that farmers are not necessarily a hard to reach audience, which they're sometimes quoted to be. It's about, for both sides, it's about knowing where and how to start these conversations and build working relationships across the sector to support both farming and forestry and benefit both as well. So this is something that Leaf are continuing to work on as part of our integrated farm management principles and our certification scheme as well. So here is the guide online. Hopefully it will play. So I just wanted to reiterate really that while this is a farmer's guide, it is also for forestry professionals, for consultants, for landowners, for practitioners. So please feel free to use it to start conversations with clients or colleagues. It's a central place for lots of advice and links to helpful contacts and information. So please check it out, pass it on, refer to it. We'll also be printing some more hard copies soon. So if you'd like a hard copy, then do get in touch with us. Yeah, there's an example of a video coming up.
Thank you, Eleanor, for taking us through the really comprehensive guide to Ash Dieback. Is there anything you want to add just at the end there? Yeah,
no, sorry, it was just a slow transition from the video, but yeah, if there's the QR code, if anybody wants to yeah, get it up on their phones later on. But yeah, no, thank you. That's all from me.
We'll also send out a link to it as well. So I'd really encourage everyone here to take a look with it. You know, it's not just for farmers, it's a guide for landowners and others as well to start those conversations about trees and woods on farms as well. And it's a really useful, intuitive guide, I think, to start looking at what you need to consider when assessing and managing Ash Dieback. So moving on from the kind of assessing and to kind of the taking action bit, we've got Mark Williams here from Euroforest, supported by some colleagues as well, to kind of talk us through some of the different considerations when taking practical action on Ash Dieback, including I think we're going to touch on health and safety, but also the financial considerations and support available there. So Mark, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm Mark Williams, Director of Operations for Euroforest. I'm actually Director of Operations for the South, so I'm a bit out of my geographical area today, but hopefully that won't cause too many problems. Joined on this call by Rob Wortley, who's our ARB manager for North England, and Will Rolfe, who's our senior ARB manager for South England. So Euroforest, a very quick introduction. Euroforest is a group of 6 companies. Sheffield & Co is a haulage company. Prime Rickett Silviculture is a forest management company. Euroforest Ireland is a timber harvesting and marketing company based in Southern Ireland. Bolt 4 is a Estonian company that retail products for us. Blacklock Harvesting is our bespoke mechanized harvesting department, and Euroforest is our timber harvesting and marketing company. What do we do? We're the largest timber harvesting and marketing company in the UK, and we've made significant growth into arboriculture, largely due to forest client demand for that service due to liability issues around Ash Dieback, and we've sort of pioneered or been part of a team pioneering mechanized arboriculture. I'll try not to repeat anything Eleanor or Nigel said, so I'll skip through some of this. Ash Dieback, as you'll know, known as Clara fraxinia, first discovered in the UK in 2012, although Nigel said it's probably been here since 2006. Now endemic across the UK. There's an estimated 35 million tonnes of standing ash in the UK. And whether everyone agrees with that or not, I think until recently there's been limited government guidance. One of the biggest concerns we had as a business when we started dealing with ash was health and safety, and specifically health and safety of the people we put out into the forest to harvest ash. And there's several reasons behind that. Hazards can be deadwood shakeout, where the top of the tree gets very fragile. Lack of stem integrity, which can cause the stem to fail. Lack of fibre strength at the felling hinge. Secondary infection, which Nigel touched on earlier, and also increased risk of windblow. To sum that up, it's uniquely dangerous, or we see it as uniquely dangerous, and we've worked closely with FISA to produce guides for forestry workers who are dealing with Ash Dieback. Very unpredictable. Swift action, less unpredictability, less risk to operators and public. Protecting the public, advice to landowners. I'm sure many of you are landowners on this call, and you've probably heard this many times before, but act swiftly. The sooner you can deal with ash, the safer it is for the operators, and also the more value there is in the standing material. So Nigel touched on this, so I'll skip through this. Identify your ash stock, zone your sites, tackle high risk areas first, seek advice, engage competent people, and again, act swiftly. Rob, I don't know if you wanted to add anything at this point, if you're able to.
Hi everyone, so I'm Rob. Feel like I'm going to repeat myself with what Nigel and Eleanor have previously said. So I'll change this kind of slide to maybe what we're seeing in terms of a contractor when we're giving reports at the moment. Not to discredit any consultant's work, but the time of surveys to identify Ash Dieback seems to be well out. So we're getting reports that maybe trees have been surveyed in December, January, and the trees have been categorised into stage 4, stage 3. And as contractors, we're going on to site and then maybe in stage 1, stage 2. So to tackle Ash Dieback, especially for farming, I would suggest maybe doing surveys twice a year. So you get one in the summer with the trees in full foliage, and then you can really understand the different stages, and that will implement your high risk or high occupancy zones and how the work should be determined. Yeah, and in terms of what Nigel was saying about not all trees need to go, I agree. We can certainly do other ways and means of increasing habitat value of them trees or their ash trees. So we're in the right place, we can veteranize trees. So we can do coronet cuts, fracture pruning, which mimics natural features of trees when they're in the veteran stages of their life. and that'll increase habitat value from nesting birds, your bugs, and it can also ignite new epicormic growth, which we have already understood with the new growth of Ash Dieback. Obviously, that'll die first, but if we can increase that habitat value by duochronic cuts and fracture pruning, it's always going to be advantageous. And that's kind of really all I can say without repeating again what Nigel and Eleanor have said. So well done, guys.
Thanks, Rob. As I said earlier, as a company, Euroforest have very strict procedures about putting chainsaw operators or traditional tree climbers anywhere near ash trees. We think the risk is far too high, so we try to mechanise all the works we do and protect the operators, plan our work, put operators in protected cabs, full-on protection system cabs. Ash is very brittle. Tops of trees are constantly falling out on top of machines. You can protect operators. It's not an environment we want to put chainsaw operators in. I say we dismantle or mechanically fell trees, ash trees, wherever we can. And if you have to use motor manual felling, then you need to really look at the risks involved in that, and ask yourselves the question: can the trees be left? Which I think is what Eleanor said earlier. We don't need to fell all the ash trees. What is the risk of falling material? What is the risk of stem snap? And what is the risk of trees toppling? And are there any other safer options? So I think the next slide probably doesn't install anyone with any happiness on a nice evening, but these are the sort of dangers that happen when you are dealing with chainsaw operators at the bottom of ash trees. This chap was a very experienced operator, a trainer, an NPTC assessor, working in standing dead ash trees, felling large dying ash trees in the woodland. A dead branch from a neighbouring ash tree fell and struck him on the cheek. His escape route wasn't adequate, but the speed the branch came down, there's probably little time for him to escape anyway. And as I said earlier, much better in a protected cab. So if you are engaging contractors to do the work, just be mindful that industry guidance, FISA guidance, is not to put chainsaw operators at the bottom of ash trees, and that really goes for trees in any kind of condition. It's very difficult. You can look at the canopy of a tree and think that ash tree looks fairly healthy, but the stem integrity can already be compromised. Secondary infection can cause root failure, so very unpredictable. Euroforest, what do we offer? I'll quickly run through this. It's not really a sales pitch, but for you that don't know Euroforest, timber harvesting and marketing, mechanised arboriculture, site investigation and infrastructure works. If you don't have loading bays and you don't have roads in your woodlands because they haven't been worked for a while, we offer timber haulage. We do all the civils work. We offer forest management. We do all the ecological checks, survey works and project management. What I will do is if anyone wants this PowerPoint afterwards, I'm happy to share it with anyone on this call, and we'll have all our contact details on there as well. So for those of you that don't know what mechanised arboriculture is, we use this technique when we're dealing with trees, generally against highways and against rights of way. And you can see several examples here of some work we've done for highways authorities, for landowners that have trees adjacent to roads, and we're using what we call sort of long reach mechanised kit to do those type of works. There's lots of advantages with that. It's safer, but it's also quicker and it's also cheaper. So what do? We reduce the liability for the landowner who has diseased or dangerous trees adjacent to public highways and public rights of way. We remove the need for traditional arborists and motor manual chainsaw operators, resulting in safer operations. It's quicker than traditional arboriculture, therefore reducing the costs and disruption. We utilise all the fibre resource whilst offering an income from the arisings as well as an income from roundwood. We have access to potential funding assistance for traffic management from highways departments across the UK. We work very closely with highways departments, and we're often able to help fund traffic management applications and road closures. And we have, as part of our sister company, Primary Silviculture, we have a group of professional forest managers that can assist with restocking grants post-felling, and I'll come on to some of the grants shortly. It's a bit about the services we offer there. We've covered most of that already, but as well as the sort of mechanised, we do site clearance and mulching if you're looking for change of land use. We do tree planting and marketing. Obviously, I'm not going to go for all our accreditations. Happy to send you this PowerPoint so that you can look at it later on if you want to contact us and engage us in any of our services. So markets, which is something specifically that I was asked to sort of pick up on. So we've got access, Euroforest have access to all the UK roundwood, fuelwood and roundwood sawlog processing markets. From forest operations and domestic arborizings, we try and maximise the value for the client by marketing lop and top from operations. On the next slide, I've got some indicative roadside prices for the north east of England. So it's not the area I normally geographically trade in, but I've sought advice from my colleagues, so I'm fairly convinced these are okay. So you've got a grade of ash roundwood that we call processor grade firewood. When I say that, I mean that is what firewood merchants now require to put through a firewood processor. So it's specific in terms of its length and diameter. Now we're trading that product at the moment at anywhere between 65 and 80 pounds a tonne at roadside. And you can see below that I've put in a typical specification for that product in terms of its length and its restrictive diameter. And then we also market what we call non-processor grade firewood, which doesn't attract the same value. And again, I've put a spec in there. The main difference in the spec is that this material is generally 45 to 50 centimetres above in diameter. Something we also market on a regular basis is the lop and top, the branch wood that often gets left in situation in a forest environment. So we gather that up on a clear fell operation that can have increased benefits for the landowner in terms of preparing the site for restocking. So we gather up the lop and top and the branch wood, and we take it into your loading bay or somewhere that we can put it through a chipper, and we sell that product into the fuel wood and the power producing markets. So that also, as I say, saves you significant amount of money when it comes to restocking the site because the ground prep is already done for you. And then if there is good quality stem wood on the ash trees that are being felled, then we are able to market saw logs. Very broad range of prices for saw logs, very dependent on quality. I've put a very rough guide in there as a minimum 3.7 metre length, minimum 30 centimetres top diameter, free from knots and decay. But you know, ash saw logs, it depends on the quality of the material. So you know, we could potentially get higher prices for you than that, but it would really depend on the quality. But I've put there a guide price. So we talked a bit about funding earlier. It's not necessarily my field of speciality, but I will just cover this. So DEFRA have what they call a tree health pilot scheme. If you're applying for trees in a woodland, the group of trees you're applying for must cover at least half a hectare, be at least 5 metres high, or grow to that height, and have crown cover of more than 20% of the ground area. Grant requirements for trees outside of a woodland, trees outside of the woodland, any trees or small woods which cover an area less than half hectare, for example, trees in hedgerows or along roads or in parks. Who can take part in the scheme? Well, basically anyone can take part in the scheme, but it's usually by invite. Sorry, skipped on to the next slide. But by contacting DEFRA, you can ask to be included in the scheme. The one problem at the moment is it's not available in the northeast of England, but I have a meeting with Plant Health tomorrow, and I am being informed they are looking to roll out the tree health pilot scheme to other parts of the UK. So I would expect that this will become available to the northeast of England in the fairly near future. Currently, funding is available for between £375 and a very odd number of £2,425 per hectare, and that covers can cover costs towards the felling. It can cover costs of infrastructure improvement, loading bays, etc. So there's no defined subject that can be spent on, but you do have to apply for this grant, and it has to be approved, and it is on an invite only basis. Someone's just put, please tell them to roll out the tree health pilot scheme as soon as possible. I certainly will do that, and I'll be banging the drum tomorrow. So there's an element of funding available there, which I'm sure will become available. I would imagine that would be available from spring next year, but happy to keep this group informed of that. The other funding that's available is for restocking areas post felling. Again, not my field of expertise, and I expect there's probably several people on this in this meeting that have a much better understanding of the countryside stewardship scheme than I do. But you can claim this grant following felling of trees infected with Ash Dieback. One requirement is that you must have a felling license. Where this scheme has been applied before, you've been able to apply for it under a statutory plant health notice, but ash isn't covered by that notice, so you must have a felling license. There are several points here that you must have as part of the application, but I won't run through all of those, but I'm more than happy to send people, if I have a list of emails, I can send people this slide on restocking. But in terms of monetary values, you have 3 years to restock the area that's been felled, and you can claim for a range of capital items that include trees, tree shelters, fencing and deer fencing. And the grant is capped at these levels. So for native species, £6,000 per hectare for ancient woodland, and £4,720 per hectare for other woodland. And non-native species is £3,000 per hectare for ancient woodland, and £3,850 per hectare for other woodlands. So there is funding available. We can certainly help you tap into that funding. Certainly with the countryside stewardship scheme, that funding is available now for restocking. We will try and get the tree health pilot scheme made available to the northeast of England very shortly, and we will keep you informed of that. As I say, more than happy to send these slides to people so they have an understanding of these items and what's required. And there is a link there within the slides to the government publication, and also a link to our sister company, Prime Ricket Silviculture, who can advise on this further. And I think that's probably about it from me at the moment. Don't quite know how I got on for time, but I will stop sharing and see if anyone has any questions for myself, Nigel, or Eleanor.
Thanks very much, Mark, and for providing points that we're not in an echo chamber. It's clearly the guidance that everyone is agreeing on in terms of dealing with ash and how to approach it, but also providing insights there onto the financial aspects of dealing with ash. I know that can be a major concern for those with ash, both in terms of trees on farms, but also areas of woodland that are predominantly ash. So with that, we have a few questions in the chat already. If I could ask you, if you'd like to ask a question in person, please raise your hand. The hand is, for me, it's at the top of my screen, but I know for others it often is at the bottom. So if you click on that, we'll call you in order to ask questions. We do only have about 5 minutes left, but we will just keep going. But if you do have to drop off, we will put the recording on YouTube so you can catch up then. And the contact details of all the speakers, along with some supporting resources, will be shared afterwards. So please do feel free to reach out and ask your question directly to the speakers. So the first question is to do with the minimum area that Euroforest will work on. Is there I suppose it depends on the work available and the support, but I think Chris or C has asked the question that they have a 4-hectare copse with ash. Yeah, I was just about to type a reply to C guest. There's no minimum area. 4 hectares, the copse with ash, we'd be delighted to come and look at. I mean, as with any operation, there's obviously the larger it is, the costs tend to reduce. It's just the scale of the economics of it. But
more than happy to come and have a look. I'm confident that the 4 hectare copse of ash we'd be able to offer you a price on. Obviously, without seeing it, it's difficult to say quite what that would be, but what I will do is, Rosanna, are you going to sort of share contact details from this? What's your plan? Or can I
Yeah, we
respond to you with contact details for Euroforest? Will that help?
We'll share out Euroforest contact details afterwards, so so anyone can get in contact directly with yourselves.
Okay. So the simple answer is there is no minimum area, and one of our managers will come out and have a look. It's free of charge assessment, so okay. We won't charge. We won't charge to come and look at the copse or any other trees. So yeah, by all means, get in touch.
Thank you. Chris Hogg, do you want to unmute and ask your question? If not, I can read it out. Chris asks, what do you advise for the use of timber from ADB works on a smaller scale than Euroforest operate? Again, it touches on scale. I suppose it touches on markets as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you say work on a smaller scale than Euroforest operate, I mean, we buy individual timber wagon loads of fuel wood from woodland owners. So I don't know, Chris, quite how much material you've got, but I mean, generally the minimum requirement we would look to buy if it was if it's presented at roadside is sort of 25 tons, a pile of 25 tons of ash roundwood we'd come and purchase. Potentially smaller volumes than that, depending on where it is and how accessible it is. But again, our managers in the area are more than happy to come out and advise you on that. Come and have a look at it. So not a problem at all.
Nigel, do you have any? Have you seen any anything from other landowners that have got kind of small areas or small volumes of ash and what they do with it?
So again, Rosanna, sorry.
Have you? Based on your experience with others that have maybe smaller volumes of ash material available, what typically do they do with it? They sell it as fuel wood or leave on site? What else are you seeing the uses of ash for?
Generally 2 things really. I suppose I see a lot of people just felling it to waste and or just leaving monoliths for ecological value and that sort of thing. And the other thing is just fuel wood. So that's about it really. Apologies, I don't really see what happens in the end because my role tends to be the risk management side and mapping and identifying, and then it's over to like Mark and Rob really to deal with the aftermath, I suppose.
I mean, something that's quite good in a group like this is you are bringing a lot of landowners together. So if you all had smaller quantities of wood, it wouldn't be difficult for us to sort of gather those up. If Chris had 5 tons and I don't know, Anthony and Peter and Stephen had 10 tons, we could send a lorry around to each of those individual sites, weigh the quantities onto the lorry separately and pay for those as we pick them up. So there is no real limit to the smallest amount we can uplift, if that helps.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Especially on economies of scale and small woodlands. We do have a lot of fragmented small woodlands in the northeast and Yorkshire, but also across the country that are, what Forestry Commission would class as unmanaged, and some of those barriers are to do with scale of operations. But you can, work with those in your local area as well. To try and reduce those costs too. So it's a really important point, Mark. Thank you. How useful is pollarding to extend the life of an infected ash tree?
That's one for Nigel or Rob.
I think we can do a joined up approach on that one, Rob. My view is it's a bit of a 6 and 2 3s really. I think it's useful if you've got a tree in a higher risk location. And by undertaking the operation, you're going to knock out a load of dead wood and a load of material that's potentially going to hit a target. That could be useful in that respect. But from a tree health point of view, yes, arguably you're compromising the tree's ability to photosynthesize and its normal growth processes to deal with disease and issues like that. So you may invigorate a little bit of growth out of it, but you're then creating a load of vulnerable growth, which is probably going to get reinfected. So my view really is, well, you could do that from a safety point of view, but I think we're stuck with the Ash Dieback, and it may well eventually succumb in the end. I don't know, what do you think, Rob?
Yeah, I agree with you, Nigel. So in terms
Yeah.
of reducing risk, pollarding would be a good idea. In terms, when I say veteranize, that would be to increase habitat value. Some people see veterinizing as a pollard. But once the tree is infected, the tree is infected. And then when you're sprouting new growth, that will just eventually succumb to Ash Dieback quicker than if you left the tree as a mature or veterinized tree. And also you've got to think, as if you're leaving or you're opening up new wounds, the tree will expand energy, healing them wounds. It's also open to secondary infection. So you really need to work out why you'd be pollarding that tree.
Thank you.
I think
The
the only
next
thing I'd just add
question.
quickly on pollarded
Yeah, go on,
trees
Mark.
is that we have done quite a bit of that, and because secondary infection from honey fungus often destroys the root system, sometimes you see the pollards even without windy conditions just fall over and can still be a hazard if they're left next to roadsides. So I think you just need to be a little bit careful where pollards are left, I would say. I don't know if you agree with that, Nigel, but sometimes you see them left next to highways, and if they've had Ash Dieback, quite often that sort of pollarded monolith can still sort of fall out into a public highway. So I think there's a time and place for it, but it's certainly not near public incursions anyway.
Yeah, I think you're definitely sort of arguably there could be a bit more stability if you've taken the big sail area off the top, but you're going to have to still inspect it on an annual 18-month basis. So my view is, because I mean, I'm a fan of monolith, and generally the size of the monolith relates to the distance to the target, in my view. So a monolith 6 meters of a tree that's 8 meters from a highway, that's good. That's a good thing to do. But if it's 12 meters and 6 meters from the highway, not such a good thing to do. Yeah.
Thank you. We have touched on the geographic nature of the fact that we're kind of based in the northeast. We've obviously got others on here from the southwest, which is fantastic. Is anyone able to comment on the applicability and the availability of grants and support in Scotland?
I'm not at the moment, I'm afraid, but I can certainly get some information for you and send it to the group. I can speak to my colleagues and forward that to you.
We might follow up on that, I think. If there's no one on the call that can immediately touch on it. I think what we can say is that everywhere is slightly different currently, and whilst we can try and speak to the different bodies and get greater support for landowners to deal with tree health issues and to deal with Ash Dieback, it is kind of dependent on the region, and there are obviously restrictions around different grants and the different requirements for those. I'm just looking down the questions. What experience is there bringing ash back into coppice? And I presume, Chris, this is Chris asking another question, to do with ash that has Ash Dieback in it and then trying to bring back the coppice. Can anyone pick that one up?
I think my microphone's working now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good. Okay, sorry before ignoring your request. Yes, it's a bit similar to pollarding. I think we've got an ancient woodland. It's got loads of lapsed ash coppice, and actually in storms, some of them are just splitting out at the base. I think they're kind of top heavy. They haven't been kept in cycle. If there wasn't Ash Dieback, it would be good to bring them back into cycle, but I presume the risk is just too high otherwise.
Probably a bit similar to the pollarding question, I think, as to where you're going to ultimately end up. I think if you're creating numerous low diameter stems, you're creating, in quite a dense sort of stand area, you're going to create high moisture content at a lower level, and I think you're just creating good conditions for the fungus to thrive. So I think you will end up in an unfortunate situation. Yeah.
it's north facing slope in a valley. It's so yeah, sounds worse for that as well. Okay, thanks.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
Can I
think I
just have it?
Yeah, go on, Chris.
Eleanor's document mentions all the protected species, and that the tree health scheme that covers protected species surveys. That's really useful to know the areas that can get it.
I'm glad that you found that of use already, and I don't know if you've seen it previously, but you've already spotted something that's of interest and relevant to you. So that's really, I think, nice feedback to have. I've just touched on the markets. Finally, I think to wrap up, if no one has any other questions, and you know, I think in the northeast and the Yorkshire area, for ash, I think generally what we're seeing for smaller areas is actually where it's a decent, well, yeah, good enough to go to fuel wood, is that's where the highest price is currently being commanded, and it can be fed into those supply chains and those markets with relatively low volumes. So I think Mark touched on it, you know, reach out to other woodland owners to see if you can maybe pull together a volume that's large enough to go to someone like Euroforest, but also speak to your other wood fuel supply chains, markets, you know, that sort of thing, suppliers in your local area, because they may also be able to work with you and provide you with a bit of extra income for those operations. I don't think anyone has any further questions. So I would just like to say thank you very much to you all for coming. I do hope it has been of use. Thank you very much to our speakers, to Nigel, to Mark, to Rob, and to Eleanor. I'd just like to wish you all a good evening, really. We will be sending out an evaluation form along with the resources that we've touched on this evening. We'd really appreciate any feedback that you may have, whether that's on tonight or whether something you might like to see in the future. So please do fill that in, and we look forward to seeing you at other events that we run soon. Thank you very much.